Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 2009 horror remake, Night of the Demons. Now, this is a film directed by Adam Gierasch, and he's done a few things. He was an actor in a handful of movies. I think he also directed a couple other films before this. And, well, at the end of the day, I thought this was an average, adequate film. I thought this was an okay, mediocre horror movie and remake. His direction really doesn't do anything to make this film anything other than a combination of those things. This is one of those movies that it's not a film where you're going to point to the direction and say that it's particularly awful, it's terrible, it's bad. But it's also not one of those films where you're going to look at and be like, this is a really well done movie in terms of direction. I think that's really the best that Adam can provide. And you know what? That's more than a lot of other directors can actually say, because there's a lot of directors who make movies who really don't have any business behind the camera because they don't have any natural talent. They're just doing it because, hey, they like making movies and cool, they get to live their dream, but it doesn't mean that they should subject their shitty direction to the masses. That being said, I don't think Adam is one of those directors. I think he does an adequate job. I think he's an adequate director. I just don't think he's the kind of director who, due to their style or their flair or their own innate ability, can really make a film rise above that particular bar. And also, I don't think he's really that good at directing sequences that are supposed to be scary or have any kind of genuine impact in terms of creating a certain eerie mood or sense of atmosphere. But that could also be the production designer, could be the art director, could be a combination of different elements. It might not just be something that he's solely to blame for. That being said, I don't like the way that this film is shot for the most part, especially when it comes to the sequences with the demons. They're shot in ways that are too light. And by too light I mean the lighting is too bright. They have all these different bright colors. I think they're maybe trying to go for like a haunted house spirit Halloween kind of vibe, but it makes it look like a Disney Channel original movie. It makes it look like an ABC family horror film for kids. And that's not really the kind of vibe you want for an R-rated horror movie. For instance, look at the shot here of Angela. It doesn't help that her makeup design is looks like something out of Big Wolf on Campus. It really does, or something, or some YA made for teens horror movie like Halloween Town or something. It doesn't really help that the design looks like that. But it also doesn't help that the lighting is very similar to that kind of approach. And there are other scenes that just seem like they're just look like they're from a music video, like a rock music video, and that doesn't really mesh with the vibe either. So I mean that kind of approach can work in other films and other productions and stuff, but in this particular instance, I don't think it's really that effective. I think he did a decent job working with his actors, getting the most out of the actors and actresses that he had. Um, there were some sequences that were well shot, that actually looked pretty good, but I don't know if that's really technically 100% due to him. Could be the second unit director. I don't know for sure. But overall, it's one of those directing jobs where he helmed the project well enough. He didn't steer the ship into an iceberg. He didn't sink the ship, but it got to the destination. But that's really about it. I would have liked to have seen Kevin Tenney once again. I don't know why. Like, it seems like an obvious choice to have Kevin Tenney come back to the franchise, or maybe have other directors like Tommy Lee Wallace or some other more veteran, experienced guys come in and direct the film. Some horror I'm trying to think of the right word. Tours, I don't think is really the best way to put it, but some experienced horror directors to come in and helm the movie who haven't done something for a while. Hell, even someone like Fred Decker who does a really good job blending horror and comedy. Um, it has a script by Adam Gierasch and Jace Anderson, and this script, to me, it's a pretty considerably sized mixed bag. There are elements and parts of this script that I really like or I thought were interesting, but then there's other parts that really fall short that really make the film trip up and trip over itself and not really reach the finish line, uh, at least with the best possible time that it could. Like it could be a winner, but it just kind of lags in some areas. But like I said, there are some genuinely good things about this, some stuff that I like. For instance, I really like the setting of this film. I like the fact that they changed things around. It no longer takes place at Hull House, takes place at a New Orleans mansion. I like that the mansion has its own backstory. I like that the demons have their own backstory. It's different than what the approach was in the first film or any of the sequels. In this movie, you get more of a backstory and explanation for the demons and why they're there and what the plan is. I like the fact that the demons were so extreme, they were so violent, they were so unruly that Satan kicked them out of hell because they were also trying to take over hell. Like they were trying to overthrow the power structure of hell. So Satan wasn't having any of that and sent them out of hell. I like that. I think that's pretty badass. This is some pretty badass demons, and like that's actually a line of dialogue. Those are some pretty badass demons. Yeah, because that is a pretty badass thing. I mean, for demons to be so extreme, so intense, so untrustworthy and unruly that they have to be kicked out of hell. So, and then it ties into the backstory that's created with Evangeline, who, sometime in the 20s, was contacting. I think she was trying to contact a loved one through a séance or the spirit world to try to get them to help her find a mate. And the demons they trick people, so they lied to her. And on Halloween night in 1925 at this mansion, the demons possess her party guests one by one. And the whole thing is, if 7 people are possessed on Halloween night, these demons that were so badass they were kicked out of hell, they will take over the earth. They will be able to come into our world and cause all kinds of havoc, all kinds of craziness and hysteria. And so I like that. The stakes are raised, the stakes are higher, and the stakes are different. And that ties into what happens years later with the events of this film, where there were 7 more party guests, and now it's up to them to try to do their part to prevent the apocalypse. I don't mind that particular approach. It's different than what they did in the first movie. It's similar in the way that, yes, it's more of party guests who are alone in a mansion and have to deal with demons, but for the most part, it's different. It's a different approach. It's a different take, and that's what a remake should do. Is it should put a new enough spin on an old idea, and I feel that this, for the most part, this script does that. There are other aspects of the screenplay that I really liked it as well, that I thought were really interesting. Like, for instance, the demons, they don't have a typical weakness in this movie. They are not. It's not crosses or holy water that is a weakness for these demons that hurts them. It's actually rust. So that leads to the protagonists in the film using rusty tools and rusty pipes and metal and all this kind of stuff to fend off the demons. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. You don't see that very often in these movies that deal with demons. Most of the time it's just the typical holy water, crosses, or religious items. But in this instance, it's rust. And that leads to a really cool montage near the end where the lead, Maddie, she takes some shotgun shells, puts some rusty nails in them and goes to town and starts blasting some demons with a shotgun. So there's a lot of, interesting stuff here that leads to some genuinely worthwhile sequences. Speaking of worthwhile sequences, there's a whole scene that takes place in an underground bunker underneath the mansion, and it's genuinely full of some real tension. And this is one of the rare instances where the shaky cam or the frenetic or the high energy camera work actually kind of works, because it is one of those scenarios where you're like, oh my god, like we gotta stay one step ahead of these demons. We gotta get out of here alive. The demons are crawling upside down on the top of the bunker wall or the ceiling. There's a lot of it's a genuinely suspenseful sequence. There's a lot of suspense in that scene. And then there's a really cool sequence later on where the three survivors, they're holed up in this room in the house, and they find out that this room is a sanctuary. They are protected from the demons because of these symbols and these spells that are drawn on the walls in this room. So the demons can't get in. So that leads to one of my favorite scenes in the film where the demons decide to make blood pour from the walls to wash away the symbols so that they can weaken the spell and get into the room and get to the remaining survivors. And so there's this really well done and shot sequence where the walls are bleeding and demon arms are busting through the walls trying to grab at people, and it's a race against time where all three of the remaining survivors take some pieces of charcoal and try to color in the symbols as they're being washed away. And it's a really well done and cool sequence. It's simple but very effective. Just a bunch of hands and arms just breaking through the wall. And so yeah, there's stuff. There's quite a few stuff like that when it comes to the script that is pretty cool. There's a couple different twists and turns and stuff that happens by the end of the movie that I thought was rather inspired. There's a particular way that they handle the ending, which I thought was a nice little trick, a nice little way to trick the audience, because initially I thought it was going to go the really predictable route, and thankfully it didn't go that way. And I am very grateful for that, because if it went the way that I thought it was going to, I would be ranting on this movie. I would be talking about how, yeah, there's a few scenes and this sort of stuff that I like, but fuck this movie, because of the ending. But that's not really what they went with. So I got to give the writers credit for handling things that particular way. I also like how. Well, this honestly is more of a effects thing, so I'll get to that later. I don't think that's really something that the screenplay can really boast. And some of the characters are actually pretty well written and decently fleshed out. Maddie, Colin, Jason, even the way that they portray Angela. It's a different approach than how Angela is portrayed in the first film. It also helps the film stand out. She's more of a slutty goth chick than the shy, reserved goth chick that Angela was in the first film. She's more confident in herself. She's the type of individual where if you're friends with her, you got to keep an eye on her because she might steal your boyfriend. That kind of thing. I like that. It's a different approach to this character. So for the most part, the screenplay does try to take a different approach, but there are times where it doesn't, and that's where it really falls flat on its face. And for some reason, this film has more than one scene that's just a straight up either homage or a really uninspired clone of a sequence. So Linnea Quigley actually has a cameo in this, and it's really uncomfortable. And the reason why is, okay, she has a cameo where she's dressed up in the same pink ballerina costume she was dressed in the first movie, where she's showing her ass to the guys at the convenience store. Well, in this film, she's she's showing her ass to trick or treaters, and that's just fucking awkward and weird and uncomfortable. And we're not talking about like teenagers. We're not talking about adult, in Night of the Demons, she was supposedly playing a teenager, if I remember correctly, a young adult at least. Here, she's a grown adult, dressed in sluttily, and showing off her ass to some kids who are trick or treating. It's really not. I don't understand what the screenwriters were thinking there. If you want to have a Linnea Quigley cameo, that's fine, but the way that they handled it was really awkward and just did not work. I really felt kind of skeevy, after seeing that little cameo. Uh, Nothing against Linnea though. I'm not blaming her. And then you have this film's version of the lipstick scene. It starts out essentially the same. She's like drawing a circle around her tits, around her nipple, and then she shoves the lipstick into her breast. And they did it practically. I'll give them credit for that. But it doesn't have the same impact or surreal bits of holy shit, what the fuck, like the first film, because you've seen it done before. So this film, it it really makes the mistake of, oh, well, we're not doing the same thing because we're doing it bigger and we're doing it better and we're doing it crazier, and it just comes across as incredibly forced. And what I mean is, after the girl puts the lipstick in her breast, she starts bleeding like a tsunami of blood out of her pussy, and then she like sticks her finger in her vag and pulls out the lipstick. And I'm just like, that's just taking things way too far, to the point where it's just ridiculous, and it's not scary, it's not shocking, it's not unsettling. It's honestly kind of stupid. And it's just like, I don't understand when films do that. Like, for example, the Evil Dead remake was like, let's make the tree rape scene like more intense than ever before, and as a result it comes across as just gratuitous and loses all the impact. And that's what happened here with the lipstick sequence. I also feel this film doesn't really have that great of a sense of humor. They did some kind of silent movie prologue, or try to be funny, but it doesn't really work. And there's other moments where it's trying to be funny, and it just comes across as corny. That's really the best way to put it. The humor comes across as more of an example of just pure cornball cheesiness than anything that is legitimately funny or is going to elicit a genuine laugh or guffaw. It's the first film is much better when it comes to balancing humor and horror, and I think maybe that's kind of what the director and the writers are trying to have, more of a fun house, like a haunted house sort of film with humor and horror and so on and so forth. And that's why they had more of a light camera work, or the cinematography was lighter and they had brighter colors and stuff, but it just doesn't really resonate on the same level because the humor just, honestly, the humor sucks. So that's one aspect of the script that definitely is a very weak point, is the film's attempts at humor. Also, I felt like the horror elements, it's not really that scary. It's not really, and like I said, and honestly, none of the Night of the Demons films are really that scary. But this one is other than the third movie, is the least scariest of them all. And they have moments where there's some bits of gore, but there's like I think it's like a disembowelment. That's probably the standout moment, is a disembowelment in one character gets her face ripped off. But other than that, a lot of the gore is very tame and kind of blink and you miss it. Uh, One of the bloodiest scenes is a scene where the walls are bleeding. So that's a little bit of a letdown. How certain characters are kind of dispatched is a little lame. Uh, and it does take a little bit to get going as well. And I honestly think it takes a little bit too long to get going because it does this kind of fake out thing. So what I mean by that is you have this big party at this mansion that Angela's set up, and this party scene feels like it's taking uh, forever. It feels like it takes forever. This party scene, just watching it makes you feel ancient because it's dragged out so goddamn much. It doesn't help either that the editing in these party scenes is awful and irritating and obnoxious. But these party scenes, they feel like nothing but padding. And I don't really like a lot of party scenes in movies because it doesn't really feel like you're ever a part of the party. You're always just looking at it from a bird's eye view, and you're never really a part of it. And they don't really do a lot of POV stuff or anything. So it just feels like you're at a party that you're not invited to, or you're not even at the party. You're just looking inside the window of the house that the party is at with some binoculars or some shit. So yeah, there's this party stuff. Well, what I mean by fake out is the cops come in and the party is canceled. And then you're kind of like, really? Like, what? Like, the party's already over? And then it was an excuse to get the 7 characters alone in the house. I'm like, okay, all right, I guess. But yeah, I mean that kind of just drags a little bit, and like it was like the first 20 something minutes of the movie is just that. 20-30 minutes is just that kind of stuff. For a movie that's only 93 minutes, you would think that wouldn't, hurt it that much, but it kind of does. And then you have some, the bits of character development they try to do. I mean, you're first introduced to these 3 girls, or you got these 2 girls, I think. I don't think it's 3. And actually, no, I believe it is 3 girls, if I remember correctly. So these 3 girls, they're friends, and they're getting ready for the Halloween party. And the character development is, oh, you're dressed up in the same cat costume as I am, or you're such a slut, or I got my pussy is chafing because I got a too strong of a wax. You're just like, what is this? Like, why? Too much information, and also why do we need to know any of this? So yeah, the screenplay does take a little bit for things to really start to get going. But admittedly, once things start to move forward, once demonic activity starts occurring and people start turning and so on and so forth, it goes by at a decent enough pace. It isn't particularly that dull or particularly that boring. It's just one of those films, the story just takes a little bit to really start to get its wheels moving. But like I said, it's a mixed bag of a script. It's not a great script. It's not a script that's gonna blow your mind, but it's at the same time it's not particularly hellish, like other screenplays tend to be. The performances by the cast, I think there are some performances that I thought were genuinely great, like Edward Furlong and Monica Keena. There's some others that they did a good job with whatever role they were asked to do, like Diora Baird as Lily, or I think Bobbi Sue Luther or Suzanne. But then there's other characters that are you're just like, Yeah, so I think you got Lily. Yeah, Lily and Suzanne. But really, the two, and I didn't mind the actor who played Jason, Jason Rogers, John F. Beach. He had a nice bit of charisma when he was supposed to deliver some, comedic lines of dialogue. He was the only one that could actually deliver humorous lines that actually made me kind of smirk at least. Shannon Elizabeth, I thought she was fine too as Angela. She didn't have the same presence as Kincaid, but she wasn't trying to do the same sort of thing. Uh, I will say this: I really wish that they had her the costume design and everything was different. At least the hair. The hair just makes her look like an emo chick, and it's just, and especially when she's a demon. Why does she have the fucking hair with the streaks in it when she's a demon? It's just, it just looks like somebody's goth, uh, deviant art character. You know, it just doesn't. I don't really like that design. I don't really like that particular approach. Um, but yeah, I mean, there really isn't any bad acting, to be honest. I'm not gonna point out anyone in this movie, or I'm like, oh my god, their acting was so bad it hurt, except for maybe Michael Copon. You know, this is the kind of actor you get for a coupon. You know, you get him in your movie because you have a coupon for like 50% off his salary. This guy's a poor man's Taylor Lautner. Like that's the best way to put it. Like the guy, they almost look like they are identical twins, and he has like the same acting ability to boot. So yeah, not really a big fan of Dex, the character, or the performance by Michael Copon. And Monica Keena as Maddie, I honestly thought this was the best performance I've seen from her. And what's interesting is she was the lead in Freddy vs. Jason, and I never really bought that performance or that character. I think she was that great in that film, and I thought she was great in this. I really liked her performance. I liked the character. I thought when she needed to be a badass, it was believable. I thought overall it was a really good performance by her, and I also liked Edward Furlong as Colin. He's not a perfect guy or a perfect character. I personally would have liked it if he lived, but that's just me. But it was nice to see Edward Furlong in a film like this, and I thought he delivered a good performance. So overall, decent cast, pretty solid performances all the way around, except for a few instances. Features a score by Joseph Bashara. I'm not really a big fan of this score. It's trying to be more contemporary from the time period, but it doesn't really necessarily work. The songs, even though there's one by 45 Grave, who I really love their song, It's Party Time. Do you want to party? From Return of the Living Dead. I don't think their Night of the Demon song is really that good. I don't, and this soundtrack is just, it's pretty, I'm not really the biggest fan of the soundtrack, to be honest. Um, but I guess maybe, you know, Night of the Demons by 45 Grave or like Ghastly Stomp might be like the best tracks on the soundtrack, but it's not a soundtrack that I really would listen to again and again. The editing by Andrew Cohen. Andrew Cohen, this is a guy, I want to look this up because I want to make sure that Andrew Cohen is he's got ACE after his name, so my guess is he probably is a established, well-known editor. And then again, this might not have been his choice, it might have been the director's choice. Yeah, Andrew Cohen. Yeah, he's worked on quite a few things. Um, he edited some episodes of Max Headroom, the TV show. He edited the TV movie Backfield in Motion with Roseanne. Okay. All right. He also edited the unauthorized biography of Roseanne. I guess he edited every Roseanne project, everything that dealt with Roseanne or Roseanne was in on TV in some capacity other than any episode of the show Roseanne. He did Toolbox Murders, and the remake from 2004. He also edited Mortuary, which is pretty shitty. He edited Sarah Landon in the Paranormal Hour. Yeah, he's not really that great of an editor. I thought like since he had ACE after his name, like he was a big deal, but it kind of isn't. I thought his editing was absolutely fucking atrocious in this film. The editing in this movie is one of the worst things about it. I hated the way this film was edited. It was that kind of 2000s stop and start stuttery kind of editing where they would have a party scene and they would do the quick cuts and they would do the flashes and then they'd slow things down in slow mo and then they'd speed them up again. I hate that editing. I really do. The only time that editing works is in an action sequence, but only in small doses. Uh, Other than that, if you're shooting a party scene, if you're shooting anything else other than an action sequence, that kind of editing, it's just cut that out. Don't do that. It's irritating. It's obnoxious. It takes you out of the movie. It's hard to watch. Um, yeah, I didn't really care for the editing for the most part in this movie. A lot of it's just too much manic energy, just stuttering and I'm not a fan of that. I really did not think that was the best approach for this film. Uh, Cinematography by Yaron Levy, I would say it's just about as average as the direction. Uh, Once again, I really do feel certain shots are just not done justice the way that they're shot, and the way that things are lit. And then you have the makeup. Now the makeup effects, they are also a mixed bag. I think with the makeup effects there were some designs that I think they had a budget for, but then there were other designs where they ran out of money and they just had to come up with something really quick and just this was the best that they could do. For instance, there were two designs that really stand out to me. There's a one with this character. She gets her face ripped off, and she's got nothing but a bare skull showing, and her skull is actually demonic. So it's got angular features. It's got sharp teeth. She's got like beady, like red eyes. I think that's a great looking effect for the most part. It's a really cool, striking image. I honestly wish that design was Angela's design. It's a demon makeup. It doesn't have to make any sense. I wish that was the design because this is laughable. This looks like Goosebumps. She looks like she's related to the return to, what is it, the fucking horror? I'm trying to remember the name of it. Horrorland. You know that guy, the monster with the horns? That's what she looks like. She looks like the bride of the Horrorland monster. And but the other design that I thought was good was this one, the one right here on the side. So she's very fish-like. So she's got green skin and she's got like gills and she's got tendrils, slimy tendrils that come out of her breasts and go after people. I thought that was a pretty cool looking design. I thought it was a good looking makeup effect. But then there's other ones where they just got lazy and ran out of money. Like this guy who's just got one horn on his head right here, who looks just fucking lame. And then the two last demons were all the same makeup. They just look like generic zombies. So makeup's a mixed bag, but the ones where they had the budget, where they really went all out for it and tried to do something different and unique, they really did pull it off. And even Angela's makeup, like I said, I don't really care for whatever they went with it. It's still better than the designs for the generic zombies. And I'm trying to think of other things to mention about this movie, because it talked about the makeup design. There's some CGI that's a little wonky. I don't really like how they show the demon, show people turning. It's honestly really corny. It's like super like jittery camera work and bad CGI, and like for example, it's very cartoonish. That's the better way to put it. It's straight up out of like The Mask. It's the same sort of just it's that kind of thing. And you're just like, like their hand moves really fast, and then it's like demon hand, and then it's normal, and I'm like, That shit works in The Mask, but not in a movie it's a horror film. Like, I didn't know this was The Mask 3. I didn't know this was Night of the Masks. But anyway, that's the only other thing I wanted to mention. Because I can't really think of anything else I want to say about the movie other than the budget. Like, I don't believe this cost $10 million. This is another one. If it cost $10 million, they used the budget on. They blew it on Blow. They blew it on other things. I don't know what they used it for, because what was part of it, Shannon Elizabeth's uh, paycheck. I don't get it. I don't understand why that. This does not look like it cost $10 million. It does not. It looks like it cost $5 million or less. That being said, this film is, like I said, it's okay. It's an average, decent, adequate horror remake. I've seen better. I've seen worse. It's a lot better than the cover art might suggest, because the cover art makes it look like one of the most generic fucking movies of all time. Trust me, it really isn't that generic and that overall forgettable. Um, yeah, I would say, if it sounds interesting to you, if you're a fan of the Night of the Demons films and you're kind of been on the fence about it for whatever reason, I would say give it a watch sometime. Give it a look. There are some things, like I said, that are worth watching, that are worth checking out for yourself. But it's definitely not on the same level as the first two Night of the Demons films. But I do feel that this is a much better film than Night of the Demons 3. I think it's a 10 times better movie. And I do feel it's a lot better than your average horror remake. And also, I think this has the best protagonist in the entire franchise. I think Maddie is a really strong character. And I thought overall she had a good amount of things to do. She was vulnerable enough. She was vulnerable enough when she needed to be, but also when she needed to stand up and kick some ass, she also pulled that off too. But yeah. Plus, I mean, there's some nice TNA if you're into that kind of thing in this movie as well. But yeah, it's not a masterpiece, but it's not a total disaster either. Anyway, thanks for watching my long, uh, uh, fairly winded review of Night of the Demons from 2009. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.